I was 48 years old, with $11,000 and a divorce I didn't see coming. And I almost walked away from $120,000 that was legally mine. Not because it was hidden, because nobody told me the word for it. My ex-husband had a $401,000. We had built that marriage together for 20 years. I had managed the home, raised the kids, supported his career. And when it ended, I assumed that account was his. I didn't question it once. Then my attorney said something almost in passing. 4 words. Qualified Domestic Relations Order. I nodded like I understood. I went home and Googled it for 2 hours. And what I found made me sit down on the kitchen floor. That money, half of it, was mine. No tax penalty, no early withdrawal fee. Mine. Rolled directly into my own account, to grow, under my name, for the rest of my life. If someone else handled the finances in your marriage, I have one question for you. Do you actually know what you're entitled to? The bank statement said $11,000. I had to read it 3 times. 48 years old, 20 years of marriage, and that number was everything I had in the world that was purely legally mine. Not because we were poor, because I had handed my financial life to someone else and never asked for it back. I remember the specific quality of the light in that kitchen. Late afternoon, October, the kind of gray that makes everything feel final. I sat there for a long time, not crying, past that already, just looking at the number, wondering whether a woman my age, starting from $11,000, had any real road left in front of her. You might know that feeling. Maybe you've sat with a number of your own. Maybe you've done the math in your head at 2 in the morning and scared yourself back to sleep before you could finish the calculation. Maybe you've told yourself you'll deal with it later, when things settle down, when the kids are through college, when the dust clears. I told myself that too, for about 3 weeks. Then I stopped waiting for the dust to clear and started learning how money actually works. That was 5 years ago. I'm 53 now. I'm a certified financial planner. I run a channel called Her Nest Egg because I needed this place to exist when I was sitting at that table, and it didn't. What you're going to get in this video are the 5 strategies I actually used, with real numbers attached to each one. Not inspiration, not vague encouragement, a path. By the time you finish watching, you will know exactly what your first step is. That is the only promise I'm making. 1 clear step. That's enough to change everything. But before we get there, I want to talk about the thing sitting in the room with you right now, the fear. Because if you're watching this video, you're probably carrying at least one of these thoughts. That you waited too long, that the window has closed, that you don't earn enough for it to matter, or that retirement planning is a system that was built for other people. People who started at 25 with a 401k and a plan. I want to sit with that for a moment. Not to talk you out of it, that would be dismissive. These fears come from somewhere real. Most of us were never taught this. Not in school, not at home, not anywhere. Money management, investing, Social Security strategy, these were not conversations that happened at the kitchen tables most of us grew up around. And if you came out of a marriage like I did, where one person handled the finances and one person trusted that arrangement, you may have arrived at your 40s or 50s with almost no working knowledge of your own financial picture. That is not a character flaw. That is a gap, and gaps can be filled. What I want to do right now is name the 3 myths I see keeping women financially frozen after 50. Because until we put these on the table, They run in the background like a program you forgot you opened, quietly draining everything. The first myth is that if you didn't start investing in your 20s, the math doesn't work in your favor anymore. I believed this completely. The way compound interest is usually taught, start early, start young, let time do the work, makes it sound like the train has already left if you're not on it by 30. But here's what that framing leaves out. Compound growth doesn't stop working at 50. It keeps working. And the IRS specifically created catch-up contribution rules for people exactly our age, because even the government understands that life is not a straight line. I'll show you the numbers in a few minutes. They are not small. The second myth is that the retirement assets built during a marriage belong to the spouse who earned them. This one cost women I know tens of thousands of dollars. When I was going through my divorce, I almost walked away from my ex-husband's 401k because I didn't know I had any claim to it. I had never heard the term QDRO, Qualified Domestic Relations Order, which is a court order that lets you divide a retirement account in a divorce without tax penalties. My attorney mentioned it almost in passing. Almost. If you were married for at least 10 years and you're divorced or divorcing, this conversation applies to you. We are going to have it. The third myth is that if you're not earning a high salary, your contributions are too small to matter. I hear this constantly. Women who are re-entering the workforce, working part-time, earning $40,000 or $50,000 a year, and they look at the retirement account contribution limits and think, what's the point? $200 a month feels like rounding error against the size of the problem. It is not rounding error. I'll show you exactly what $200 a month becomes over 15 years. It will surprise you. Here's what I know to be true, from my own table and from the women I've worked with since. The biggest obstacle between you and retirement security is almost never the actual math. It's the belief that the math has already been decided, that the story is written, that your job now is just to manage the ending. Your story is not written. I was sitting on $11,000 at 48 with no investment accounts, no plan, and no financial vocabulary. I am going to show you exactly what I did next. So let me show you where I started. Not with a big account transfer, not with some dramatic financial overhaul. With $8,000. That's the annual IRA contribution limit if you're 50 or older. $8,000. And I want you to sit with that number for a second, because most people hear IRA contribution limit and their eyes glaze over. So let me say it differently. The IRS gives every person over 50 a specific legal advantage that younger investors don't have. You can put more away every single year than your 35-year-old coworker can. They called it a catch-up contribution. I call it the government quietly admitting that life is complicated and people deserve a second window. The standard IRA limit for someone under 50 is $7,000 a year. Once you turn 50, that becomes $8,000. One extra $1,000 every year just for being the age you are. If you have a 401k through work, the numbers are even more significant. The standard limit is $23,000 annually. After 50, you can contribute up to $30,500. That is a real gap. That is the IRS handing you a tool and hoping you pick it up. I opened my first IRA at 49. I contributed $1,200 that first year because that was genuinely all I could spare. I remember making the transfer and thinking, this is almost embarrassing. $1,200 toward retirement at 49. But I did it anyway, because I had learned something by then. The account being open and funded, even by a small amount, meant I had started. And starting changes your relationship to the whole project. Here is what the math looks like when you run it forward. If you contribute $8,000 a year from age 50 to age 65, 15 years, and your investments grow at a conservative 6% average annual return, you end up with approximately $186,000 from zero in 15 years on $8,000 a year. I know that number might feel out of reach right now. If it does, back it down. $4,000 a year over 15 years at 6% is still over $90,000. $2,000 a year is still over $46,000. Every single dollar you put into a tax-advantaged account is doing more work than a dollar sitting in a savings account. And I'll come back to exactly why that matters in a few minutes. Your action step here is specific. This week, not someday, this week. I want you to either open an IRA if you don't have one, or log into an existing one if you do. Then make a contribution. Any contribution. $25 counts. $50 counts. The point is not the amount yet. The point is that you are now someone who is actively funding her retirement. That identity shift matters more than people give it credit for. Now I want to talk about something that most financial content skips entirely. Not because it's complicated, it's not. Because it's uncomfortable. And that's the money that may already be yours from a marriage. When I was going through my divorce, my attorney mentioned something in passing. She said, almost as a footnote, that I might want to look into a QDRO. I nodded. I had absolutely no idea what she meant. I went home that night and Googled it for 2 hours, and what I found made me genuinely angry. Not at my attorney. At the fact that nobody had ever mentioned this to me in 20 years of being married to someone who had a retirement account. A QDRO, Qualified Domestic Relations Order, is a legal document approved by a court that splits a retirement account between divorcing spouses. Here is the part that matters. When it's done correctly through a QDRO, you do not pay early withdrawal penalties. You do not trigger a tax bill at the time of the split. The money moves from their account into your own IRA or retirement account, and then it grows for you, under your name, for the rest of your working years. My ex-husband had been contributing to a 401k for most of our marriage. That account had been built, at least in part, during years when I was managing our home, raising our kids, and supporting his career. In most states, retirement assets accumulated during a marriage are considered marital property. That means a portion of that account, in many cases half, belongs to you. I worked with a client last year, a woman I'll call Dana, who was 54 and in the middle of a divorce. Her husband had a 401k worth $240,000, almost all of it accumulated during their 18-year marriage. She had assumed it was his. She had not questioned it once. When we talked through the QDRO process, she realized she was potentially entitled to $120,000 in retirement assets she had written off as someone else's. $120,000, already saved, already grown, just waiting for the right paperwork. If you are divorced or currently going through a divorce and your marriage lasted at least 10 years, I need you to do one thing today. Pull out your divorce decree. Look for the word QDRO. If you don't see it, or if you're not sure, call a divorce financial analyst or a family law attorney and ask specifically whether a QDRO was part of your settlement. There are time limits on some of these claims. This is not something to put on a list for later. I almost left that money on the table because I didn't know the word for it. You now know the word. Use it. And once you know what you're working with, whether that's a QDRO, a funded IRA, or both, the next question becomes the one most people get completely wrong. When do you actually start drawing on it? That question, when to draw on your retirement, is one of the most consequential decisions you will make. And most women I talk to have never once thought about it strategically. They think about Social Security the way I used to, as a vague safety net, something the government sends you when you're old, an amount more or less fixed that you collect when you stop working. I thought you just applied for it, at some point, when the time came. The time, it turns out, matters enormously. Here is how Social Security timing actually works. You become eligible to claim at 62, but claiming at 62 means accepting a permanent reduction, up to 30% less than your full benefit every month for the rest of your life. Your full retirement age, depending on when you were born, is somewhere between 66 and 67. If you wait past that, your benefit grows by 8% for every year you delay up until age 70. 8% per year, guaranteed. There is no investment in the world that offers you a guaranteed 8% annual return. Let me put real numbers on this. Say your full retirement age benefit would be $1,800 a month. Claim at 62, and that drops to about $1,260. Wait until 70, and it grows to approximately $2,376. Over a 20-year retirement, the difference between claiming at 62 versus waiting until 70 is more than $260,000 in lifetime benefits. Not a small rounding error. $250,000 shaped entirely by one decision about timing. I know what you're thinking. What if I need the money at 62? What if I don't make it to 70? These are fair questions, and I'm not dismissing them. Every situation is different, and there are real circumstances where claiming early makes sense. What I want you to walk away with is this. The decision deserves a strategy, not a default, not a guess. A deliberate, informed choice made with your actual numbers in front of you. Your action step here is free and takes 10 minutes. Go to ssa.gov and create a My Social Security account. You'll see your estimated benefit at 62, at your full retirement age, and at 70. Print it or screenshot it. That single document will show you the exact dollar difference your timing decision makes. Most women I work with have never looked at it. Once you do, you cannot unsee it. Now, and I need you to stay with me here because this next part applies to more of you than you might think. If you were married for at least 10 years and you are now divorced, Social Security has a specific provision that most women have never been told about. You can claim Social Security benefits based on your ex-spouse's earnings record, not instead of your own benefit. You compare both amounts, what you've earned on your own record versus 50% of what your ex is entitled to, and you claim whichever is higher. If your ex had significantly higher lifetime earnings than you, that difference could be substantial, hundreds of dollars more per month, every month, permanently. Here is the part that stops women cold when I tell them. Your ex is never notified. Their benefit is not reduced by a single dollar. This money is not taken from them and given to you. It exists independently as a function of how Social Security was designed for exactly this situation. It has been yours this entire time. The system just never sent you a letter explaining it. I know this part is hard. Stay with me. The reason it's hard isn't the math. It's the feeling of having to go back to something painful, a marriage that ended, a financial life you're still rebuilding, and claim something from it. I understand that feeling completely. But I want you to think about it this way. You spent years inside that marriage. You contributed to that household in ways that may not show up in a paycheck, but absolutely show up in his ability to have the career and the earnings record that he has. This is not charity. This is not alimony. This is a benefit structure that recognizes your role. Claim it. The third thing I want to talk about is the one that surprised me most, even after I had my CFP. And it has nothing to do with a specific account type or a government program. It has to do with where your money is actually sitting right now. A woman I worked with, 54 years old, a school administrator, careful and responsible her entire life, had $43,000 in a savings account. She was proud of it. She had worked hard to build it. And when I looked at what that account was earning, it was 0.4% interest annually, which sounds like something until you do the math. At 0.4%, her $43,000 would grow to roughly $46,500 in 10 years. She would net about $3,500 in a decade of saving. That same $43,000 invested in a low-cost index fund averaging 7% annually, a conservative, historically reasonable number for a diversified stock portfolio, grows to approximately $84,600 in 10 years, nearly double. The difference is not risk tolerance or financial sophistication. The difference is understanding that saving and investing are not the same thing. Saving is preservation. Investing is growth. And at 50, with 15 years until a typical retirement age, you have enough runway for the market to work for you in a way that is meaningful, not speculative, not reckless, meaningful. I tell clients to think about it this way. Keep 6 months of living expenses in cash, in a high-yield savings account where it's accessible and safe. Everything beyond that, every dollar beyond your emergency cushion, should be working harder than a savings account will allow it to work. If you have money sitting in a low-interest account right now, your action step is this. Log into that account today and find out exactly what interest rate you're earning. Then ask yourself one question. Is this money invested or is it just stored? The answer to that question is worth more than almost anything else I've said in this video. Because here is the clearest thing I know after 5 years of doing this work. The single greatest financial risk for women our age is not the stock market. It is leaving money somewhere safe while inflation quietly erodes everything it was supposed to protect. I think about that kitchen table more than you might expect. Not with sadness anymore, with something closer to gratitude, though it took a long time to get there. I think about the woman sitting at it, 48 years old, gray October light, a bank statement showing $11,000 and a future she couldn't yet see the shape of. She thought that number was a verdict. She was wrong. It was an opening question. The 5 years between that afternoon and right now didn't happen because I had some advantage she didn't. They happened because someone eventually showed her how the system actually worked. The catch-up contribution rules that let her put more into a retirement account precisely because she was starting later. The QDRO process that meant the retirement savings built inside her marriage didn't have to stay inside her ex-husband's name. The Social Security timing decision that could mean the difference between a diminished benefit claimed out of fear and a full benefit, or better, claimed from a position of strategy. The difference between money stored and money invested, and what that gap costs a woman over 10 years of quiet erosion. And the income picture, not one stream but several, mapped out on paper until the monthly number made sense. None of those things required a finance degree. None of them required a large starting balance. They required information, and someone willing to explain it without making you feel like you should have known it already. That is why this channel exists. I am not going to tell you that everything is going to be fine. I don't know your situation. I don't know your number, your timeline, your obligations, or what you're carrying right now that I can't see through a screen. What I can tell you is that every single woman I have worked with who felt behind, truly felt like the window had closed, found something workable when we sat down and looked at the actual picture together. Not always comfortable, not always easy, always workable. The first step is never the one people expect. It's not opening an investment account or calling a financial planner. It's deciding that your retirement is a project that belongs to you, fully. Not to a spouse, not to a system you don't understand, not to a future version of yourself who will somehow have more time and more courage. To you, right now, with whatever you have. If something in this video landed for you, if one strategy made you sit up a little straighter, or made you think of a specific account you've been avoiding, or reminded you of a question you've been afraid to ask, I want you to do one thing before you close this tab. Just one. Go to the description below this video. I've put a free retirement gap calculator there. It takes about 4 minutes to use. You plug in your age, your current savings, and what you estimate you'll need monthly in retirement, and it shows you the gap. Not to scare you. To show you the actual number you're working with. Because a real number, even a hard one, is always better than a shapeless fear. And if you want to keep going, come back Thursday. I am breaking down exactly how Social Security spousal and divorced spouse benefits work, with the specific rules, the income thresholds, and the filing strategies that most people never hear about until it's too late to use them. If you watched this far, that video was made for you. Drop a number in the comments before you go. Any number. It can be your current savings balance, your age, the year you want to retire, or just the number of minutes it took you to finally sit down and watch something like this. I read every single one, and I want to know where you're starting from. Not because the number defines what's possible, but because you showing up here today with that number is exactly how this begins. I started at $11,000 and a kitchen table and a question I was afraid to answer. You are already further along than I was, because you have something I didn't have that afternoon. You have the information. Your retirement. Your rules.